Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning! Jonathan Sexton has made it!
Do you feel moderately happy?
No, I feel like I've been kissing my sister, I suppose.
In the pocket for his drop goal attempt. Here he goes, O'Gara. He's done it! That surely is the Grand Slam.
We target players all the time. That's part of rugby, isn't it? Let me know.
Sexton, wonderful pass and Stockdale finishes.
There'll be more than grenades. There'll be full tanks and full shells landing on the Aviva.
Grand Slam winners on St Patrick's Day at Twickenham.
Welcome to Friday Night Rugby. We're here with two legendary Irish centres, I would say. One is in the studio, Brian O'Driscoll, and one is on the phone, Lynne Cantwell. Hi and welcome, guys.
Good afternoon.
It's a big weekend. Hi, Lynne, how are you? It's a big weekend. Six Nations, penultimate Six Nations weekend, obviously, and we'll talk about a lot of things coming up. But to start with, I suppose it's International Women's Day, and the 20 by 20 campaign obviously is promoting and doing a big promotion today. And Lynne, you had a promotion of sorts during the week as well. Do you want to tell us what you're doing now in terms of Irish women in sport?
Yeah, look, it was a really exciting day yesterday. Last year, Sport Ireland commissioned a big review to try and understand the landscape of women in sport across all sports in Ireland. And within that review, the objective was to try and understand what barriers and blockers to women playing sport in Ireland of all ages. You know, your kids, teenagers, adults, what happens after you retire, 50s, 60s, 70s, etc. And with that information, the Sport Ireland have commissioned a lead women in sport role and a steering group to support a kind of substantive strategy going forward that's going to focus on four main areas: coaching, participation, leadership and visibility. And Sport Ireland have commissioned grants for all of the NGBs to fund NGBs to try and address progress in all of those four key areas. So it's so my role within it all is I'm chairperson of the steering committee. So we have a really strong steering committee, and with Sarah Keane, Mary O'Connor, really strong people on it. So I think we're in a good place. We're well placed and we're well prepped to try and kind of make further progress, more sustainable progress in the area. It's
a voluntary role, is it, Lynne?
Yeah, look, you know, if you're a board member, it is generally a voluntary role. When you're a member of the overall board, I became part of the overall board last year. You do have civil servant contribution, but in general, it's a voluntary role. Yeah.
So and this is Sport Ireland. This is basically the Irish, what was called always the Irish Sports Council. Brian, obviously you're a father. You have a little daughter, a boy and a girl. Do you see progressions in women's sport and even within women's rugby? Do you notice that there's a change and that there's a sort of an appetite for more publicity and more participation?
Yeah, I don't think it's just in rugby. I think in Gaelic football and the level of sponsorship that's picked up over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. In fairness to the brands that have realised, finally the penny has dropped that if we're looking for an equal world, that there needs to be equal opportunities for men and women, and sponsorship money has to be ploughed into both games. And I think it's a massively untapped market as well. If you're a brand manager. Mm-hmm. But as a father and someone that has two sisters and has some very strong women in their life, including my wife, who's a feminist in the greatest sense of the word, I would be a huge advocate for promoting women's sports, for getting young girls active, no different than boys, because it's good for healthy lifestyle, it's good for friendships, it's good for self-confidence. It's all the things that we've always talked about with men, and for some reason the girls were left behind, whereas now we're thankfully at a place where equal rights have to be observed, and the only way we're going to get, particularly in rugby as well, and credit to the national broadcaster for taking up the Women's Six Nations games. Sometimes you have to put the cart before the horse, where maybe you don't have huge attendances, maybe you don't have huge viewership figures, but if you take the easy option and say, oh, we won't get big numbers, so we're not going to show the game, well, then you're definitely not going to get anyone watching women's sport. Yeah. Whereas sometimes you've got to show the games first of all, and eventually those viewer figures will pick up, and interest levels will pick up, and people will know an awful lot more about women's rugby, get to talk about it, it'll get more media exposure, and as a result it'll get bigger.
And it's funny, one of the slogans for the 20 by 20 campaign is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And if you can't see it, you won't love it either, I think. Isn't that true, Lynn? And it's really interesting, the English game this weekend is being moved to Exeter, and they're talking about getting 10,000 at it in England, which is very interesting. So there's going to be a record crowd, Lynn.
Yeah, it's huge. 10,000 are really, really big numbers, and already for the Irish game against France this weekend, I think they've got 4,500 tickets sold already, which is already a record, and that's without anybody walking up on the gate, which we always get about it. You know, they're 1,500 or 2,000, so there's just records being smashed all over the place. And just to your point about the can't see, can't be, and look, like, we all have it, and you know, as a kid, the smallest thing will inspire you, and you don't even know you're inspired by it. And the direction that you take. But like, I remember growing up, obviously Sonia, Susan Smith, like Mary Robinson, like we have these amazing people. Mary Robinson was just so much ahead of her time, and it wasn't until you kind of mature into an adult she realised, oh my good God, stuff that she was achieving back then was absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, like, if you see these people, we've got lots and lots of brilliant, amazing male role models. We have so many brilliant, amazing women role models now as well, and it's not about women athletes inspire young girls. It's women athletes inspire young boys. Male athletes inspire young girls. It's just athletes, great stature people doing great things ahead can just help give guidance to young kids and just, you know, put them in the right direction. Yeah,
it's one of the nicest things actually when you go even to Donnybrook, and you used to go to Ashburn and you see young boys at the Irish women's games. That's fantastic as well. Look, we're playing, and we know you're under time pressure today, Lynn. We're playing obviously France in both in men's and women, and the women are up first tomorrow night. And it's funny you were saying about having people as an example. Leah Lyons actually said in an article this week that she thinks she was the first mascot for the women's Munster team when she was little, and she still has a jersey they gave her. And that's how she got into rugby. Fiona Steed was coaching them, and that's how she got into rugby. But she's missing this weekend, and how big a loss is she going to be this weekend? And Michelle Claffey as well. They're two big injury losses, and Leah's out, I think, for 6 weeks or something like that. She's going to miss the rest.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult match. I think in general the fact that they're coming on the back of losing for the first time to Italy 2 weeks ago, and it was a really, really unbelievable performance, the best Italian side that I've seen, and Ireland were improving, but they definitely weren't as good as Italy on the day. So they're coming back off that, as well as then coming into a French match, who the French are just so completely dominant. They're down Leah, they're down Michelle already, and then there's been 2 last-minute changes as well, where Megan Williams is out, Bevan Parsons is in, and Juliet Short is out, and then Aoife McDermott has been pulled up. So you've got 4 changes in the last minute, well, 2 changes in the last minute. So it's just going to be a less familiar Irish side, as well as kind of a downtrodden Irish side coming up against a really brilliant, dominant French side as well. So it's going to be a tough day, but genuinely, like we've been talking about this week and this occasion, because there's only 2 home games, we're talking about it for weeks, the crowd is going to be phenomenal. You know, the French supporters travel really, really well, and because it is in Donnybrook as well, you're going to have a great crowd and a great atmosphere there. So, you know, fingers crossed the girls can pull it out and put in a good performance, but they'll definitely be up against it.
Brian, we were just saying, the Italian women actually, unlike the Italian men in terms of results, the Italian women this season have really played a beautiful, expansive game of rugby and have really shown it. And the results, they'd never beaten Ireland before, and they put up 29 points on them the last day. It was a fantastic game, 29-27 actually in some ways. Like, it was such a thriller, and it was hard for Ireland to lose it. But Italy are making progress in the women's game.
Yeah, it would have been great if it was any other team other than Ireland, of course. You know, it's hard to laud any team in the Six Nations when they've just beaten ourselves. But you know, they've gotten a good draw against Wales as well. I think that's what the men's game is crying out for as well, is a competitive 6 team, and it's fantastic that Italy are now starting to show signs of real improvement, and you know, if they're able to get that consistency of performance, it'll only grow the game within Italy too. Yeah, and it's a really expansive type of rugby, which is really interesting. You talked about the French game. They've had a strange season. They were defending champions, came out, played badly against England, are back on track now against Scotland, and in some ways you would look at this game, Lynn, and think, is it damaged
damage limitation this weekend because you have a very, very experienced French team. Jessie Tremoulier, the World Player of the Year last year, is back at full back for the first time this season. So unfortunately, the Irish are going to be facing her as well as lots of other brilliant people like Pauline Bourdon. So is this a damage limitation? We've a very, as you said, experimental team, new names in there even at the last minute.
Yeah, it is. It is. But you know what? Like within all of this, as much as you have your Irish hat on as well, like this standard of rugby that there's 4 teams that are playing, 4 women's teams that are playing in the world is absolutely phenomenal. And France being one of them. The style of rugby that they play is absolutely beautiful. Like you literally lick your lips every time you watch it. They beat New Zealand last summer, and like the shock, not necessarily the shock around the world, but the comments and the amount of people that were watching it from all different sports, everybody was just absolutely singing about it. So the standards they can play is beautiful, and the standards England can play, New Zealand can play, and USA up and coming. So from a rugby enthusiast, I want to see them playing the best because they're the trailblazers. They're the ones that are going to show the world the standard that women can play, and I want to see them bringing that, to be honest, on Saturday. And yes, you hope that Ireland rise to it. You hope them kind of right their wrongs, etc. But I wouldn't hold France back just to try and hope that Ireland don't get beaten at the weekend, because they can play some amazing rugby, and I hope they bring it.
Ireland were exposed badly defensively the last day against Italy. They just looked very open at times, and their defence was very, very tight. They got a lot of tries run in past them. Do you think they're going to tighten up defensively? And also, how do you think those new players are going to fit in?
Yeah, I think Adam Griggs speaks about it. He says that like they're at a stage whereby, because there's not consistency from a year to a year, and they seem to improve in 2 or 3 factors in each game and then forget about what they improved in last week, so they have to pull them all together. Defensively, they just weren't together. I think the Italians were coming at them left, right and centre with loads of different options, and as a result of it, they were just trying to, it was a little bit of damage limitation from a defensive point of view, as opposed to coming together, trust your systems, come up nice and fast. If you see a team that are gaining momentum, you just want to snuff them out. So defensively, I'm sure that they'll work on that. Ultimately, they need to try and do it because, by all chances, France are going to have an awful lot of possession, so they're going to have to fight really hard to make sure that they don't get through gaps. But I think the main thing last week was, or 2 weeks ago, that they were poor at release and pressure from their own line and their exit strategy. So they're going to have to work on that, because otherwise it's going to be a tough day at the office. Yeah,
they've been very lateral as well, so that's obviously. But I thought Catherine Dane actually is somebody who looks really exciting, the new scrum half, and herself and Fowley worked very well together at times.
Yeah, really, really nice. A great little player and a great prospect for the future. And at one position that we have got a good bit of depth, so competition there is going to be really, really important. And then Enya Breen is the new 13 in, because Michelle Claffey is injured. So
she's only 19.
Is going to 12, and she's a nice new player, up and coming, really, really good prospect. Equally, she's probably going to get the fright of her life, because the French backline running at the 13 channel, Brian will know, is a scary prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. And a 19-year-old from Bowes UL, it is a big thing to face France in your first.
But you know what? Sometimes the naivety of youth is what serves you well. And I was a bit of that in 2000 when I played against France as a 21-year-old, and kind of wet behind the ears. But yeah, you're going and playing in the biggest environments against great teams. You've nothing to lose, and I think you back your ability. If she picked at 19 years of age, straight into the national team, I mean, she's got terrific natural talent. She can learn all the rest, and you have different components to her game, the defensive side, the positional sense and everything. But she's got raw talent. So
that instinct,
and you have to play on the rationale for why you've been picked. You don't go and play internationally and then start playing a different game. You play for the reasons
they picked you.
You've been selected in the first place. So I was part of the panel for picking World Player of the Year, and obviously I saw a good bit of the 3 French players that were shortlisted in the lead up to it, and they are frightening. Their capabilities, their ability, they're very French too, abilities to play in multiple positions as well. Like no other team. Footwork, great skills, great passers. So that there's no doubt that the likes of Enya will have her work cut out. But You want to play against the best teams. You want to pitch yourself against the best, and irrespective of whether it's your first cap or your 100th cap, you want to prove yourself against better players. There's no great excitement in beating minnows of the world. It's about taking on the best teams in the world and giving it your best crack. So it's a massive opportunity and something that the women's team should really look forward to.
Yeah, and she's originally from Cork, I think, and Bevian Parsons is another one to watch out for the weekend for people as well. She is really one of the rising talents of this team. She's still a very young teenager as well. Before we let you go, Lynn, obviously we just want to get your thoughts about the men's game this weekend.
Yeah, it's an important one, isn't it? Look, like anything, I suppose I'd always kind of look at the Irish teams themselves and try and figure out what it is that they need to fix. What are the things that they need to get themselves to get them back on track, as opposed to looking at France. Look, we've no idea what France is going to turn up. Obviously, they travel poorly. All of those cliches, etc. But I'd imagine it's a real opportunity, the penultimate game of the Six Nations, for Ireland to get themselves back on track so that they can finish the Six Nations strong, which will springboard them then onto their next preparation, which is World Cup. So I'd say that would be the focus.
Is it more important to get the win and don't worry about the performance this weekend? You know, the whole thing about performance and the, the halfbacks clicking and all of that kind of thing. Is it just get across the line, beat France and still be in the running and just get your confidence back for them?
Yeah, I don't know, and it's a great debate, and it'd be really interesting to hear what Brian thinks of it. Like, I think, personally, I think it's a performance thing. Confidence is obviously really important to get your win, and they're so interlinked. It's hard to separate them. Yeah. I think a performance because, I don't fully understand what it is, why they've fallen off course, and there's probably a couple of different reasons. So, from a performance point of view, it'll be about correcting those things to get themselves back on track. I don't necessarily, there will be a confidence issue as well, and confidence comes with wins, but I think you're confident when you're secure and you're happy in what you can do and your capability, etc. And I'd imagine that's more performance focused than win focused.
And Brian, I totally agree. I don't think it's about the result.
Right.
I think it's totally about performance. And if France play one of their best games and really perform against us and beat us, so be it. But confidence only comes from playing well, not about getting a result. We got a result against Italy and everyone was devastated. It's 5 points away from home and everyone's down in the dumps. So to turn it back on its head, I think the result will take care of itself if you get that performance right. Okay. And Joe Schmidt had a phrase about, rather than one 80-minute performance, 81-minute performances of just winning the moment, irrespective of whether you have the ball in attack or in defence, that you win your next moment, and you can breathe you can breathe when the whistle goes. You can take your break, but to just win all those small little moments and not worry about anyone else's role. Just concern yourself with your own role, get that 100% right, and the sum of the parts will produce a good performance.
Brian, we can literally see their frustration because it's just that bit off and it's not clicking, particularly we'll say for the halfbacks, but everywhere on the field you feel their frustration. All this talk about them, going to Belfast, getting out of Carton House bubble, going off and watching the Black Taxi, tour or whatever they did in Belfast and having a few drinks. Is that too simple a view of it? And as somebody who's been in the bubble, how do you view that?
That stuff happens anyway. They would have done that anyway. There's nothing new there. It's not like you don't go off and do that sort of stuff. But, visit different parts of the country. I think it's important to not become capital centric with staying in Carton House and into the Shelburne. I think you've got to get to Cork and Galway and Belfast and Limerick where possible, and spread the camps out to make sure that your fan base isn't just something inside the pale. So that would have happened anyway. There's down days, so the Black Taxi would have been something to do. Dinners are had the whole time.
Drinks would have been had in Italy anyway.
And they're playing it down. Listen, we are of an age now where everyone's talking about responsible drinking. I'm sure some people would have had a couple. Some would have had a few more than a couple.
Whatever they could manage, whatever they could take.
They were still on the training park the next day, and they were sweating it out of them. So
you're right then. And so then, what is it that you think the Irish management could have done just to get them to relax a little bit and try to get this thing to click?
I don't think they're that far off. Right. I really don't. It is. We always talk at the highest level, and Lynn will know this as well, about the fine margins between success and failure, and things going really well for you and things going badly. Particularly with rugby being the ultimate team sport, because as an outside centre, I can't do anything unless there's a good line-out throw. Lifters do their job. The ball's delivered down to your scrum half in the right position for him to throw a quality pass to 10, who then throws it to 12 to you. That's a lot of things to have to happen.
Yeah.
And one thing is knocked out of kilter. The deception runs, or the ability for people to run decoy lines just stutters a little bit. They don't have a head of speed up, and so therefore the defensive system's able to read them really easily and realise they're not getting the ball and push out. And where you try and stop people in midfield to create space out wide and vice versa, simply hasn't been happening. I think you get those little details right, and Joe Schmidt teams are big on detail. You get those things right, and the game will become very simple, because they'll become collision winners. They'll get in behind, and then when you've got good halfback pairing like Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton to make decisions, then that's where they're at their best. Yeah,
our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, team of us, everyone in. And Lynn, I'm going to throw that back to you before we let you go. That notion that Brian has, that it's just a sense of, if one thing starts to work well, it will slot into place. Are you confident about that?
Yeah, 100%. Look, form is sustainable, and the form that they're in and what they've shown progressively over the last 2-3 years, to be fair, is not a lie. I think there's a reality around Conor Murray coming back and injury, and he's getting form. That's obviously such an unbelievably key cog. And then similarly, Sexton, whether it's on form or not, or coming back, not necessarily coming back from injury, but I just think the 9-10 combination, they are our strength, and maybe not are completely on form and are finding their form, which would be a key cog. Will just take a little bit of time. And as Brian says, Joe is the master of all detail, and he'll find out what the glitches are, and they'll be ironing them out as we speak. So no fear, definitely full confidence in what they can do, and definitely what they can turn around over the next couple of games.
Okay, Liam, well, look, we'll let you go and enjoy both games over the weekend, and also your new role leading the Sport Ireland's Special Committee on Women in Sport.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Great to talk to you.
Okay. Brian, to come back to this, I heard people saying during the week, look at, first of all, I suppose we should look at team selection. Let's look at team selection, because what's your view on it? First of all, it's really interesting. France, and this is one of the things I think is interesting, it's the first time they haven't changed a team since 2003, which is an extraordinary statistic. But obviously we've got a load of changes, because the last game was against Italy. How do you view this team? Everyone would look at it and say, probably pretty much the strongest team he could get, maybe without Henshaw, and also no Tadhg Beirne.
Yeah, no Tadhg Beirne as of yet in the Six Nations, and it's as someone from the outside, having been in that environment, the reason where a player has gone very well for their province and then doesn't manage to make it into the national team, there usually is either a bit of a personality issue with the coach and the player, or they haven't presented at training. And lots of coaches now, it's rare enough that a player can just deliver on the pitch in matches the whole time and not do it throughout the week. Coaches expect you to show exactly what you're going to do on a Saturday afternoon from Monday through Thursday, or if you're injured, from Tuesday through Thursday. Maybe given early parts of the week off. Whereas, not seeing him in there and seeing Ultan Dillane on the bench again, I'm a bit stumped by it, because he's been excellent for Munster. He's picked up where he left off with Scarlets last season. He did well during the summer down in Australia, but he's obviously found himself out of favour for some reason or other.
He's critical. He was critical last year, and what he was particularly brilliant was winning the ball at ruck, winning the ball at breakdown.
Last night, to have him playing in the second row, but actually playing as another back row, he probably averages a couple of turnovers a game, or certainly close to it. Playing for Munster, he looks as though he has a big engine. If fitness is an issue, he looks as though he's an 80-minute guy. So I don't know. It's one of the ones that I'm a bit flummoxed about. The rest of the team, there's no great shocks with Sean O'Brien not being up in camp in Belfast. The writing was on the wall that he was going to be left out of this 23. Whether he wants to give an opportunity to to Josh van der Fleer and see what Jack Conan can do off the bench.
Yeah.
I guess Sean probably didn't have his greatest game against Italy, but Joe definitely knows what he can produce.
Yeah.
He's had a really frustrating year or 18 months with multiple injuries, multiple surgeries, and very difficult when you have long periods of time out. You can't just pick it up after 3 or 4 games. You kind of need a run of 8 or 10 games to properly get into the flow and kind of get your mojo back. Whereas I don't think he's been fully given that opportunity to do it. So an opportunity for Josh, and then the rest of the team kind of picks itself with Henshaw still out. There's going to be question marks as to whether we were going to see him at full back again at some stage throughout the Six Nations. That was initially a dead leg the second week of the tournament, and yet he's still out. So there's got to be something else to that.
Well, that's what and I even heard people talking about today about how long can a dead leg. I mean, you can get a really bad one.
That's got to be a dead leg into a torn muscle of some sort. You know, the worst of dead legs, you know, might take you a fortnight, but there's got to be more to it. So that's, you know, very unfortunate for him, because he obviously missed the Argentinian game and the All Black game in November as well. And even though Bundy hasn't been as good in this Six Nations as he has been for the previous year, you know, you're not losing a huge amount, albeit I would say Robbie's a bit of a better distributor at 12 than Bundy, a little bit more creative, and probably packs a little bit of a bigger punch, you know, bigger guy. But you know, Bundy is certainly you know, the third choice centre in there, and I think the rest of the team then picks itself. So yeah, I think this is just about building confidence, you know, not even thinking about, like I said, the 80-minute game. It's like just trying to win 10-minute patches and trying to really perform at your very best for 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. And before you know it, if you can get some early scores against this French team, I think it'll be very interesting to see how they react, because
they're so young.
You just get a sense that if you scratch a little bit under the surface,
that's interesting.
You know, that
they're
could
so
be a little
young.
brittle.
Five of this team started against us last year. Obviously, you've got these 2 really young halfbacks. Do you think that you can get at them, and actually could they be intimidated? I think is it Ntamac's 3rd cap? You know, he doesn't ordinarily play at 10 for Toulouse. He's only played there 3 times for them this season. But I do think in Antoine Dupont they have a real player. He was excellent when he came on. In that thrashing over in Twickenham against England, I think, you know, his stats were phenomenal for the 25 minutes that he played. You know, most offloads in the game, most meters made, you know, most line breaks. So he's an exceptional talent, and it's his creativity, and I think you know, what Brunel is now picking, you know, particularly in his back line, is the flair and the confidence of the Toulouse team that have come good again. Yeah, it's like half a team Toulouse, really, isn't it? It's that re-emergence of you know, the Toulouse that we knew and loved back in the early 2000s. But you look at Ramos, you know, brilliant counter-attacking try against Scotland last week that he started for. Was it Dupont that finished it off? And then obviously, you know, Ntamak, we know what Huget can do going forward. I don't know if he's quite as good going back. So Gaël Ficou played in Toulouse for a number of years before going to Stade Francais. So these players all know each other very, very well. And I think, you know, they'll feel as though they've nothing to lose coming over here. There's an expectation and a pressure on Ireland. So if they can certainly match them for 50, 60, 70 minutes, it'll definitely squeeze Ireland into producing something big. It's really interesting what you said. You know, it'd be interesting to see how good is he going back. We've used this kicking game a lot this year, a lot of box kicking, and do you think that, and obviously Brunel has talked about it this week, he's almost flagged it up and said we know Ireland are going to kick at us. There's almost like there's a head-to-head games going on between himself and Schmidt. How do you think Ireland will play? Do you think that maybe we'll see much more of the ball in hand? No, I think they always mix their game up. I think the disappointing thing about our kicking game this year is it hasn't been as accurate as other years, whereas ordinarily you would expect Ireland to get back more than 50% of their box kicks, such as the accuracy of Conor Murray. He's just been a little bit off, and that part of his game has been a real go-to for Ireland over in the Schmidt era. You know, he's phenomenally accurate, and it was interesting listening to Ben Youngs for the England game, talking about
against Ireland, you've got to win two areas. You've got to win the ground and you've got to win the air. And they certainly did on the day. I don't think Ireland got a steal.
No.
They certainly owned the air and managed to get their blockers in. And
there's a lot of illegal shepherding and blocking
all
going
that
on,
too.
isn't there?
But they managed to, for the most part, to get it by the referees. So I think France will be able to take a big leaf out of England's book there and try and make sure that they slow ruck ball down and don't create that fast opportunity for the halfbacks to create space for other people. Both, particularly Johnny, a very, very good passer, and has the capability of splitting defences, but also that space in the air, trying to at least get 50% of the ball you kick away that you want to compete with. And it's something that we've been kind of spoilt with over the course of the last number of years, that there's just an expectation that and it's not even 50-50. You kind of think 65-35.
I would say nearly 70 sometimes.
When you're trying to get the ball back, and we've got good wingers that are very capable in the air. Stockdale and Keith Earls has really improved in that part of his game. So it's like this. I don't see. I think the bookies have given early on in the week, they were giving France a 14-point lead. I thought that was a good bet.
Well, the recent ones seem to be really writing France off, which is the thing that worried me, because I thought, why would you be? Like last year, even though it was a very different team, it took, Le Drop, 41 phase or whatever to beat them last year. Now we're facing a very different team, a more creative team, you would argue.
There's not many times that we've beaten France by more than 14 points, let me tell you.
It's ridiculous.
I think if Ireland, I do feel as though Ireland will get it done with a better performance. I hope France play well, because Ireland need good opposition to come against them. In fairness to Italy, 2 weeks ago, they played and created some great opportunities, and you hope that France will do that as well. Test them in defence, stretch them where we've had a few vulnerabilities in the wide channels. That's what we're going to come to expect in the World Cup if we're going to get to a semi-final or a final. So you want to get a taste of it.
You've got to get the good games in. So you think concentrate on performance. Obviously the line out, we're presuming with the bodies back, that's going to be better. The kicking game, it has to be better. The line speed, that's where I would think, Tadhg is the one you would be looking at there, but they've got to improve the line speed and winning the ball.
Yeah, it's the Joe Schmidt teams, it's a multitude of things. You don't ever just have a focus on one or two things. It's about understanding where you needed to improve on the last game. 16 handling errors. I don't think you'd have seen 16 handling errors in all of last year's Six Nations.
Exactly.
So to have that in one game, they'll be hugely frustrated. Their quality of passing, I think, hasn't been as good as it ordinarily would in this year's Six Nations. So I'd say they're two areas: a little bit of ball focus and carrying and being direct, and not trying to get to the width too quickly, and get those passes out in front, and the knock-on effect that will have to getting a half yard or an extra yard in behind defences, and then having defensive teams and defensive lines on their heels versus on their toes, is the difference between making line breaks in the third or fourth phase and getting smashed back on the contact zone.
Yeah. There was some calls during the week, I noticed it again, these are not rugby people, if you like, proper the people inside in camp, but the notion that maybe Ireland needed to be more expansive. But do you think we're going to see a similar game as we saw last year? Take it up the middle, wear them down and be careful, particularly when they've been making handling errors.
Yeah, listen, people are wondering whether they've worked Ireland out. I certainly don't think that's the case. I love that, we need to be more expansive, and yet, all of last year, the way we played, we lost one game. Yeah. So some people, it's difficult to please them, all right, that now it's not good enough just winning. You've got to win with flair and excitement. And yes, we all want Ireland to play well, play like they did against England in the first half last year, play like they did against the All Blacks. But it's very hard, a country like ourselves, to continue to peak at that game on game. So you'd have to think that they'll improve on their first on the Italian performance, and hopefully lead into what will be a phenomenal game over in Wales in a week's time.
Do you see any, the Sean Cronin absence this week as well? There was a load of talk about it. Is that really irrelevant, on a big game like this? Really, it's almost like it's extra noise.
It's only relevant to Sean Cronin. You could be sure that any of the guys that were in, Niall Scannell wasn't bothered about Sean Cronin not being in camp, or Rob Herring. Yeah. So he's the only one that's really feeling the effects of it. When you have a game, you can't feel, to focus on. You can't feel too sorry for those that have been omitted. Even if they're good friends of yours, you'll say your small pleasantries to them, but ultimately it's about focusing on your own performance and making sure that you do justice to the jersey yourself. And I do think that Sean Cronin, he hasn't gone from number 2 to number 4. I still think that he's probably number 2 choice, and it's not ideal that in his first Six Nations start he didn't have his best game. But the reality is he's been very, very good for Leinster this season. He's been pretty accurate with his darts. He missed out on not having Devon Toner in the line out over in Italy. And the whole team didn't play well, and so as a result it probably highlighted his inaccuracies. But I don't feel as though all of a sudden he's gone from 2 to 4.
So you're saying he could be back even for the next game, do you think?
He's a very different type of hooker than the other 3. And I think you've got to have a little bit of variety to what you're bringing in. The explosiveness that he brings, where you're chasing a game, with 20 minutes to go, it's a real luxury to bring a player like him off the bench. But just unfortunately for him, his darts, are what you're going to be judged on, and the line out didn't function the way you would expect it to against Italy. But that's not solely on Sean Cronin's shoulders. There's lifters and jumpers involved in that too.
A lot of moving parts in that.
Yeah. So I don't think we've seen the last of Sean Cronin, put it that way. He hasn't been kicked to the scrap heap.
Yeah, didn't seem to be a lot of extreme reaction to it during the week already.
There was a bit of that after the England game too, so I wouldn't pay too much heed to it.
Yeah. How do you see this game going? I mean, we always say you need to get a good start, but in front of a home crowd, as you know as a player, how important is that?
I think England did exactly what they would have hoped for in their game, where they scored within 90 seconds. They quietened the crowd completely. I was in studio, but you could sense that there wasn't the same atmosphere, anything like you'd ordinarily expect for a Six Nations game. And we're constantly on the back foot. So no different than going to Stade de France. What's the best way to get yourself into the game? Get an early score, and particularly if you can get a 5-pointer. It just quietens the crowd and takes a little bit of sting out of their tail, and then you play your way into it.
And we saw with Wales the last day how important the crowd can be. I know it's a special stadium and it makes a lot of noise, but even still, you've got to think with the home advantage, they've got to drive it home.
Well, you hear the players talking the whole time. Anytime they have some success, they thank the crowd, because it's an integral part of you overachieving at times, where they push you that extra yard, where you're massively fatigued, but yet you hear a roar from the crowd, or you feel energised by their excitement and their anticipation, and them willing you to do a great job. It adds an extra 5% to your performance, 10% sometimes. So yeah, I think you want the crowd to be in the game as much as when it's for you. The loud cheers are also very much partisan against the opposition there, and they're aware of it too. So I think it's a big component, and it is that 16th man.
What would you pinpoint as, because we've been impressed by France, obviously, particularly in the last game, and I mean, the first 2 games were chaotic for them, really. But is Fico a good distributor? How does he pair with Bastareaud? Where do you think we might be able to get at them, as I said, apart from their youth, maybe, and that vulnerability? I
think there's always question marks around the fitness of the French team. The top 14, I wouldn't say, is the fastest league in the world. It's a real focus on forward play and a lot of kicking involved in it. So I would say, if you were going to play expansively, it would be to try and tire them out with 60 minutes gone, and make sure that they're trying to unload their bench a little bit earlier than we might want to do our own. People talk about Bastareaud defending at 13 and trying to get into the outside channel. He rarely gets beaten there. So I think more often than not, you have to take it direct and through the guts, and that old phrase of earning the right to go wide is very true against them. Just as teams, when they've had success against us, they've gone direct through us. We've gotten a little bit narrow, and then they go to the extremities. And I think that's a template for most teams, the world over, that you have to go direct and suck defences in to then be able to create space out wide.
So finally, you sound to me like you're confident that this notion that people can read us now, that Schmidt can't come up with something new, that's a misjudgment.
Well, people, Scotland didn't read us particularly well on the Jacob Stockdale try, so the power plays probably haven't been as impactful as they ordinarily would.
They're not sharp.
And someone made a point yesterday to me. Is there any chance that Joe's holding back something? Not showing his cards too much for Rugby World Cup? And it made me think. I don't think so is the answer, because I think he's always been able to pull in certain plays, against different opposition, and we're obviously not going to be playing anyone. So we're going to be playing Scotland, obviously, in the pool stage. But other than that, so he probably held his cards back a little bit, but yet he still produced something that I'd never seen before, that I'd never been involved in training in that Jacob Stockdale try. So I think he's still always going to modify his template depending on what defensive system comes at him.
So finally, what's your prediction for this one?
I think we'll get it done, but it'll be a tight game, a real battle up front. They've got a huge pack again, some real athletes, and they will fancy their chances. But we've got to try and start really well, which we've been a little bit slow with in this year's Six Nations. We let teams come at us, so we've got to take the front foot. But I fancy us to get it done by 6 or 7.
Good to hear it. Thanks a lot, Brian O'Driscoll. Thank you.